The knock came at 2:13 a.m. Too polite to be urgent, too patient to be human. James was awake because he was always awake at 2:13. Night shift nurse, 34, body clock tuned to the hour when most things sleep and the rest confess. The apartment was a cube of quiet, 6 floors up, one window onto a parking lot where a sodium lamp drew a circle. No one stood in. He lay still and counted the knocks. 3, a pause as careful as a held breath. 3 again. Whoever it was had learned how to seem harmless. He sat up, the mattress answering with tired springs. On the wall, the digital clock showed the part of the night people forgive. 2:13. His phone lay face down on the nightstand like a witness no one had called. The knock again. 3. 3. And then the smallest scrape, paper against floor. James patted over the cold wood to the door and flicked on the hall light. The peephole showed in what peepholes always show, a fisheye world that didn't know you accuracy. He pressed his eye to the circle and saw nothing. An empty hallway with a runner carpet that made footsteps sound like someone else's idea. You open the chain, the latch, the lock, because routine makes you brave in the wrong ways. When he cracked the door, the hallway breathed on his face. No one there. Just a plain white envelope on the mat, waiting, like it had always been there. He brought it inside without naming why his hands shook. He tore it cleanly with a thumbnail, the way he opened patient labels at 3 a.m. Inside, a single sentence, blocky black letters like someone had typed without wanting to be stylish. Do not answer the door. There are warnings that feel like favors, and warnings that feel like rules. This one felt like both. He set the paper down and made coffee he didn't need. The kettle sighed at the end, the way all small machines do. He stared at the door, until the staring became a habit. At 2:20 a.m., the apartment settled the way old buildings admit they're tired. Pipes cleared their throats. Somewhere upstairs, a toilet negotiated with gravity. James told himself not to laugh, not to make a hole in the quiet with sound. He slept like a nurse, thinly, on alert, in fragments you could stack to raise yourself out of the night. The next day ended too quickly, the way day shifts end when you didn't have one. He showered, dressed, built his life into pockets, wallet front left, keys front right, pen clipped to shirt, then decided against going in. He was off, he reminded himself. Off meant the kind of time that invented problems. He ate stale crackers and read the line again. Do not answer the door. Like a game instructions card someone had left in the wrong box. He put it on the table, centered, a small white rule holding the room together. At 2:13 a.m., the knock came back. 3, and then 3. He put his palms flat on the table, the better to feel the wood if it tried to tell him something. He did not move. The knock stopped. Silence spread out into the places where decisions live. Then, through the door, soft, close, practiced, his own voice said, James, it's me. Let me in. There is a flavor of fear you only get when something wears your voice without asking. His tongue found it immediately. He stood and went to the door and put his ear to the seam. Say your name again, he whispered, because habit made him assess before he refused. James, his voice said back, patient, warm, shaped like him. You left your wallet in the stairwell. I picked it up. You'll want it. James looked at the table. His wallet lay there, brown, tired, papered with receipts from coffees he hadn't tasted. He waited for the feeling of relief, and got only confirmation. Who are you? He asked. Let me in, not answering, and I'll show you. It went on like that for a little while, the way bad conversations do. James didn't open the door because the paper said not to, and because his body, which had carried 1,000 other bodies through nights of machines and beeping and learned suffering, had achieved the kind of wisdom that says no before the mouth does. Eventually, the hallway took its silence back, and the door remembered it was just wood. He slept poorly and woke to an apartment that had the wrong kind of tidy. On the welcome mat, another envelope, pushed partly under as if embarrassed by its own insistence. Do not look through the peephole. Do not look through the peephole.
Great, James told the empty air. Now we're playing Simon Says. The elevator in his building had learned to stop at the wrong floor. That afternoon it took him to 3 when he'd pressed 6, then opened its mouth as if to say, do better. He walked the stairs counting steps, counting a life across concrete that remembered other shoes. On 5, Mrs. Ruiz's door was opened 2 inches. She lived alone with puzzles and crosswords, and the kind of polish you apply to wood that never asks to be touched. She never opened her door past 8. She never left it unlatched. Mrs. Ruiz? He called softly. You okay? She appeared like a photograph walking out of itself, hair pinned, robe tied with a knot that had practiced. Have you heard it? She asked, voice as thin as birthday candles right after the wish. Heard what? The knocking, she said, at odd hours. Not rude. That's what makes it worse. He pretended to think. Plumbing, he said, like a man auditioning for the role of reassurance. She squinted at him like she could see the lie's brand name. Don't open for polite, she said, and pushed the door shut between them with the softness of someone closing a book they'd read before. That night he turned on every light, then turned them off one by one as if darkness was a thing you should ease into. He didn't go to the door when the knock came. He pressed his fingers to his eyelids until the colors inside his head proved he was still living. The voice returned, sweetening its vowels, trying out different hymns. Angry, laughing, tired, hurt. James, it said. I locked myself out. James, it said. It's me from work. James, this one low and broken and engineered for a door chain. I need help. He sat on the floor with his back against the door and counted in 4s. Nurses count in 4s when they don't want to count in breaths. A whisper through the seam. Just look. You'll feel better when you see it's me. He stood because he was human. He stood because the instruction, do not, carries an itch under the skin. He leaned toward the peephole, then stopped with his eye a coin's width away. There is a kind of curiosity that doesn't want answers, only consequences. He moved his face just enough and looked. The hallway was a bowl. The lens bent it, but the bending wasn't the reason everything was wrong. Someone stood too close to the door, the way children do when they haven't learned about other people's air. A face pressed into peephole distance. His face, his tired eyes, the scruff he pretended was a beard so he could feel older than the hour. He watched himself not breathe. He watched a smile arrive on his mouth that had never lived there. It was wide, patient, a smile that knew it had all night. See, the mouth said without moving. It's me. His hand went cold on the wood. He took an involuntary step back, and the door answered with a soft complaint. The face on the other side did not flinch. It didn't blink. He tried to watch for blink and felt insane for not being gratified by one. Behind him, in the corner where shadows like to practice their angles, something stood. Tall, still, the exact height of a door that thinks it's a person. He did not turn. He recognized absence like a professional. A papery sound as precise as a promise. He looked down. An envelope lay by the leg of the chair he hadn't moved in months because chairs remember who they're for. Turn off the lights. Hide. Turn off the lights. Hide. He obeyed because obeying is sometimes a way to feel like you know what happens next. He killed the lamps, and the overhead, and the kitchen glow. Darkness arrived quickly, the good kind for a second, and then the other kind. He slipped behind the couch, a low, sensible couch that had never pretended to be anything else. He crouched, and his knees informed him they remembered high school basketball more fondly than they should. The knocking grew louder. Polite had ended its shift. The door shook gently in the frame like a thing choosing not to become violent. James slid a hand to the table and held the edge, because he needed to feel a straight line. From the other side, "I know you're there." His voice. "You always hide behind the couch when you're scared." He had, once, when he was 10 and thunder had tried out its audition for God. His mother had laughed and sat on the floor with him and told him thunder was just clouds announcing themselves, like show-offs. He wanted that memory to be a shield. It made a good target. "Let me in," the voice coaxed. "I can't stay out here all night." Another envelope whispering along the floor. He found it with blunted fingers, opened in the dark by feel. "Run. There is a running you do with your legs, and a running you do with your life." James stood, his knees surprisingly interested in the plan, and grabbed his keys. Metal chattered softly like a tiny debate. He didn't put on shoes. He put his hand on the lock and looked toward the corner where the shadow waited. "Will you?" he started, and then stopped because he didn't know how to ask nothing to come with him. He unlocked as quietly as luck. He opened the door a slit and slid through like a letter being mailed by someone careful. The hallway was empty the way an operating theater is empty, only because everything dangerous had agreed to step back for a second. He closed the door behind him. The locks seated themselves with the gentle clicks of good habits. He looked down the hall left and then right, and reminded himself panic hates decisions. He went right. It didn't matter. The building had developed a sense of humor. On the wall, the room numbers gave him a sequence his feet could believe. 601, 603, 605. Then, as the corridor bent like a thought you didn't finish, 601 again. Same door, same dent in the jamb, same brass peephole he didn't want to recognize. He swallowed. The air in here never changed temperature. He went left, then left again, and the building let him arrive at 601 like a reward for doing what it wanted. From behind one door, the sound of quiet crying. From behind another, a television murmured into an argument about who was right, without once mentioning what mattered. Far down the hall, someone stood. His own shape, his own shoulders, his own posture, when fatigue has argued you down to a compromise. It waited the way a mirror waits. James took one step back. The figure did not follow. It smiled and showed no teeth. It raised a hand in a small, friendly wave, the kind you use when you want to be the kind of person who waves at neighbors. Then it was closer without traveling. The lights didn't blink. It simply owned the intervening distance in a new way. James's body made the sound you make when you see an accident about to involve you. He turned and ran, keys in fist, socked feet soft, the carpet swallowing his intention. He took the stairs, because elevators obeyed something older than buttons. He flew down one flight, and then another, and then stopped, because the landing plaque read 6 each time, a 6 that had practiced writing itself. He leaned against the rail. He focused on the feeling of metal under his palm, the texture of the paint, the small roughness where a previous tenant had carved a board initial. He breathed in 4s. He imagined Mrs. Ruiz behind her door, hands folded over a crossword, pointing at 34 down and saying, "Don't open for polite." A light dropped out of the ceiling somewhere, then another. The hallway went from cheap daylight to emergency red, that color buildings use when they want you to feel like time has become blood. The shadow was in front of him on the landing now, occupying empty like a professional. It raised one hand, no fingers, just the idea of a gesture, and the stairwell held still like a dog learning a trick. An envelope at his feet, because the world had remembered the language they were using. From behind one door, the sound of quiet crying. From behind another, a television murmured into an argument about who was right, without once mentioning what mattered. "Do not return home." He wanted to argue. His bed was there, his shirts, the plant that didn't need him but grew to make him feel included. He wanted to say, "I pay rent," as if that meant anything to an arrangement older than locks. But the paper had held so far,
and the paper felt like the plan. He went down anyway. The stairs conceded a floor and then another when he stopped reading the numbers. On 2, the door to the hallway pushed open when he leaned on it, grateful to pretend it had always been that way. He sprinted into a corridor that had learned to look like itself again. A shape at the far end. His shape. Patient. Watched. He didn't bargain. He cut right past the laundry room where machines practiced their constant kindness. He pushed through the exit bar and the back door gave him the night. Outside, the parking lot had been drawn by a hand that preferred straight lines. The sodium lamp hummed its tired song. The air had that just after 3 clarity. His breath became a presence he could be proud of. He didn't look behind him until he hit the sidewalk. When he did, there was nothing at the door. The building looked like it always had, a big tired animal asleep on its belly. A curtain moved on the 6th floor, or maybe a thought did. He walked, because running tells the night your prey. He put 6 blocks between himself and home because 6 sounded like a round number. A diner remembered to be open, and remembered how to be a room for people who had not decided where to sleep. He slid into a booth and let the orange vinyl announce him. The waitress poured coffee without asking if he wanted it, and he watched steam become prayer. "Long night?" she asked, because this is what people say when they mean, "Are you okay?" He nodded. He watched a man at the counter stir cream into black until the cup held a weather he could stand. He watched a girl in a hoodie tear a napkin into soft squares and build a small city, and then destroy it. When the coffee cooled into honesty, he took his phone from the table and texted his supervisor, the thing you text when you're past pretending you're fine. "Can't sleep. We'll pick up extra overtime. There is safety in doing the work you know. There is also hiding." He promised himself he'd go back in daylight, with someone whose job title began with a letter that made other people stand up. He promised himself he'd buy Mrs. Ruiz batteries, just to do something that had an obvious result. He went to the bathroom and washed his face at the sink where thousands of tired men had washed theirs. In the mirror, he recognized himself with relief so sharp it was a new pain. When he came back, an envelope lay by the salt shaker, white against chrome. He didn't ask the waitress where it had come from because her night didn't need his ghosts. He opened it like a person opening the next breath. "Stay in the light until morning." "Okay," he said, half to the paper, half to the diner, half to whichever fraction of himself had not yet tried to be brave the wrong way. "Okay." He ate toast slowly, like a person learning to trust small foods again. You reread the line until it became part of the tabletop's wood grain. He let the fluorescent evidence of morning creep into the glass and watched dawn set up its small business across the parking lot. At 7:12, when the world remembered how to be busy, he called the building manager. He described noises without adjectives, a door with a visitor that had learned his habits. He asked about the guys who could come and stand where he had stood and tell the air to behave. "Can come by this afternoon," the manager said. 3? Like 2:13, but with its tie straightened. "I won't be there," James said, and surprised himself with the clean way the sentence stood up. "Let yourself in." He went to work because work is a ladder with steps that are always where he left them. His first patient was a woman who pretended she didn't notice he was new to her. He changed a dressing, and the wound underneath became less angry just by being witnessed. He listened to a man explain why he'd stopped sleeping, and nodded like a person who could give sleep back like a pill. He calibrated a pump. He ate a sandwich in 6 bites between beeps. When his hands were busy, his mind stayed agreeably stupid. When he washed them in the sink and watched the water make its case down the drain, he reread the line in his head. "Do not return home." The words became the kind of rule you put on top of a wound and let it teach you patience. After his shift, he bought a duffel bag and let the store congratulate him for the decision to go somewhere. He bought socks, because socks remind you bodies are solvable. He bought a toothbrush because people who have toothbrushes have plans. He checked into a motel with a number for a name and a vacancy sign that blinked like a bad habit trying to reform. Room key on a plastic fob, bedspread a pattern invented by someone who didn't want to be remembered.
He put the duffel on the chair, and the chair looked pleased to work. He sat on the bed, and the bed did a very good impression of being a bed. It was quiet, in a way different from the apartment. There was no knowledge of a long hallway outside, no neighbor's footsteps bottled by carpet. Air conditioner hum, small, obedient, the kind of quiet a room has when it has seen more than you but promised not to tell. An envelope on the nightstand, because this was the contract he was in now. He opened it. The plan continued.
Call your father. Ask about the night you moved.
James stared at the line until it made less sense, and then more. He hadn't spoken to his father in 6 months, because the last conversation had featured words that bruised. He dialed anyway, thumb doing what muscle memory demanded. His father answered like someone who had been expecting a different call. James. Do you remember, James asked, the night we moved to the apartment on 6th Street? I was 9. It was raining. You said the new place would be quieter. He forced himself to breathe in fours and leave space in the question. His father took a long time. James could hear the kitchen chair come out from the table, the way wood announces itself when someone needs to sit to tell the truth. I remember you telling me, his father said, that someone kept knocking. In the old house. Late. Always 3, then 3. Your mother said don't open, for polite. You slept between us for a week, and then you didn't anymore. We moved because... He stopped. The sound a man makes when the line he was on turns out to be a cliff. Because? James asked, like a nurse. Because of the door, his father said, and the sentence was small and enormous at once. Because it wanted something. Because I looked once and saw. Another stop. Saw something that looked like me and kept smiling. James let the silence breathe. He let his father breathe in it. He set his palm on the nightstand, on the envelope, on the weight of still being here. Thanks, James said finally. For what? His father asked. For the part you just said out loud, James said, and they both laughed a little. The good kind that shakes dust off old furniture. They said other things that didn't try to matter, and then hung up the way men do when they are practicing being softer. James slept while the afternoon tried out different angles through the motel curtains. He woke at 2:03 without wanting to, and lay still and let the numbers walk 10 minutes to 2:13, without inviting anything in. No knock on the motel door, no voice wearing his shape, just air running its errands, and a television he didn't turn on out of respect. At dawn, he found an envelope in the narrow space between the door and the carpet, where no envelope should ever be. He opened it as if opening is the way to get the day right. When someone knocks, do not answer. When someone uses your voice, do not argue. When a hallway repeats, turn toward light. When you can, help someone else read. He copied the lines onto the pad by the phone, in his own blocky letters, because writing makes rules behave. He slid the copied page into his wallet, the one waiting on the table when someone lied about it. He folded the envelope into the motel Bible, because good news hides well.
Do not answer the door. She laughed once, a sound with no humor, and put the envelope on the nightstand. She turned off the light and lay on her side, and watched the dark do what it always does. In the corner of the room, where corners like to practice not being seen, a tall absence inclined its head and kept watch. The story isn't over yet. Every envelope leads to another secret, another night, another choice. Follow our channel to uncover what happens next. Don't just listen to the horror, be part of it. Join the party, if you dare.